Lexington, Massachusetts Bay Province, April 19th, 1775, 5 a.m. The night has been far from peaceful for the people of Lexington, for rumors abound of an approaching threat. Cloaked horsemen have been seen riding the surrounding roads. Church bells and the crack of warning shots can be heard in the distance, ringing through the darkness. The Lexington militia have already assembled once not long after midnight, but with no immediate visible threat. Their commander, Captain Parker, has permitted them to return to their homes. Instead, many go to Buckman's Tavern, overlooking the town common, and doze by the fire with muskets nearby. A drum beats the alarm. Militiamen scramble to form up on the common as the threat finally appears. British light infantry, the King's soldiers, clad in their red jackets, and come to enforce obedience. And what happened next remains seared onto the American psyche. However, accounts of it will include a host of half-truths, misconceptions, and perhaps just a few lies. All of which leave a single burning mystery. One we will judge today in our animated courtroom. Who pulled the trigger that sparked the Revolutionary War? Who fired the shot heard round the world? Thanks so much to Belroy for helping to put this American Animated History episode in the bag. Today, extra historians, we're calling you up for jury duty. For the court of history has been convened, and over the course of this sitting, we're going to hear from two separate groups. In the left gallery, the prosecution, the Lexington militia, and in the right gallery, the defendants, the British Army. All right, order in the court. I've always wanted to say that. Sorry. The accusation in question? That the British fired first, and the militia were peacefully dispersing when they were attacked. And over the course of this trial, perhaps we'll be able to build a clearer picture of who actually fired that famous shot. So with the preamble out of the way, this court is now in session. By April 1775, the province of Massachusetts Bay was a British colony in name only. Before a shot was fired, American revolutionaries had successfully seized control of the militia, the local courts, and the legislature, confining royal authority to the port of Boston. British efforts to disarm the colonial militias were ongoing. The last attempt, starting late on the night of April 18th, involved a force of 700 elite British grenadiers and light infantrymen conducting a secret night march from Boston to the town of Concord, where they intended to destroy militia supplies and apprehend revolutionary leaders. Though that column didn't get far before the alarm went out, aided in part by the patriot propagandist Paul Revere, but that is a tale for another day. But what's important here is by the time the regulars reached Lexington on the road to Concord, the local militia were expecting them. 3 British light companies confronted Captain Parker's militiamen on the common, and the following points are agreed upon by all our eyewitnesses here today. Article 1. That the regulars fired upon the militia, though whether they fired first is disputed. Article 2. That the regulars charged the militia with bayonets. Article 3. That 8 militiamen were either immediately killed or mortally wounded. And Article 4. That the surviving militiamen scattered, and the British resumed their march to Concord. That much is fact, the rest is for us to determine. In the aftermath of the killings at Lexington and the fighting that raged elsewhere that day, the Revolutionary Congress sought to get its own facts straight. It was, of course, acutely aware of the propaganda value of what had just happened. So within days, courts were convening to take depositions from eyewitnesses to the day's bloodshed, some of which will be recounted here in our animated court by some of our lovely creator friends to protect those giving said depositions, but mostly because it's fun and the original givers are all dead by now. Those colonial accounts all agree that the militia were not out seeking bloodshed. In fact, they were starting to disperse when they were fired upon by the British and offered no resistance. Or so says the prosecution's first witness, Captain John Parker. He states that upon the approach of the regulars,
I immediately ordered our militia to disperse and not to fire. Immediately said troops made their appearance and rushed furiously, fired upon and killed 8 of our party without receiving any provocation therefore from us.
Other accounts state the British officers actively ordered their men to fire, calling militia witness number 2, militiaman John Robbins. He describes one British officer shouting,
"Throw down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels."
Robbins swears that the militia were dispersing when the officer
ordered their men, saying, "Fire, by God, fire."
Witness 3, Elijah Sanderson recalls.
I heard one of the regulars, whom I took to be an officer, say, "Damn them, we will have them." And immediately the regulars shouted aloud, ran, and fired on the Lexington Company. 8 of the Lexington Company were killed while they were dispersing.
Witness 4, Sergeant William Monroe swore that his fellow militiamen
on parade had began to disperse when the regulars fired on the company before a gun was fired by any of our company on them, and continued their fire until we had all made our escape.
There is a further affidavit from multiple militiamen claiming it was the officers themselves who not only encouraged their men to fire, but who actually shot first with their pistols. Even more damning is the fact that several British soldiers captured later that day back the militia claims. Witness 5, Private John Bateman of the 52nd Regiment, admits,
I heard the word of command given to the troops to fire, and some of said troops did fire.
Well, there you have it, Zoe. It seems like the case is pretty open and shut. The Lexington militia were peacefully dispersing when they were violently attacked by the regulars. Oh, right. Sorry, I knew I was forgetting something. Man, justice is complicated. Okay, let's hear from the defense. Now, it's worth noting that the militiamen whose accounts have been used for testimony so far have certainly gotten their stories straight before coming to the stand. These accounts were carefully collected and curated by the Revolutionary Provincial Congress, and they almost all emphasize the points Congress wants to make. The militia were dispersing, the redcoats fired first, the militia did not try to resist. This was with good reason. The revolutionaries knew the British Army would be sending its own report to London and were determined to beat them to the punch. The militia depositions were collected, bundled up, and dispatched across the Atlantic on the fastest ship the revolutionaries could get their hands on. The gambit worked, and it was Congress's account, not that of British soldiers, that reached King George, Parliament, and the London press first, causing outrage. But what of the regulars involved in the carnage on the Common? Unlike the efforts of Congress, there was no attempt at collecting a formal set of eyewitnesses at the time, but we can try to do our best now. Calling our first government witness, the commander of the regulars on Lexington Common, Major John Pitcairn.
I instantly called to the soldiers not to fire, but surround and disarm them. And after several repetitions of those positive orders to the men not to fire, some of the rebels who had jumped over the wall fired 4 or 5 shots at the soldiers, which wounded a man, and at the same time, several shots were fired from a meeting house on our left.
Indeed, a light infantryman from the 10th Regiment did suffer a minor injury. An officer of the 10th Regiment and our second British witness, Ensign Jeremy Lister, corroborates this.
Major Pitcairn called them to disperse. They gave us a fire, then ran off to get behind a wall. We had 1 man wounded of our company, in the leg. His name was Johnson.
Our third government witness is the commander of the British expedition himself, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith. He swears that
only one of the militia fired before he went off, and 3 or 4 more jumped over a wall and fired from behind it among the soldiers, on which the troops returned it.
Other British soldiers agree that the officers were calling on their men not to fire as they advanced, and that 1 or a few militiamen first shot at the regulars from a wall or nearby buildings. Some, such as Lieutenant Frederick Mackenzie, admit,
shots were immediately fired, but from which side could not be ascertained, each party imputing it to the other.
Also, regardless of who took the initial shot on the Common, it may not actually have been the first fired in anger that day. Often overlooked is the account of British Lieutenant William Sutherland. He recalled that while the column was still approaching Lexington,
a fellow from the corner of the road on the right hand cocked his piece at me, burnt priming. We still went on further when 3 shots were fired at us, which we did not return. And this is sacred truth as I hope for mercy. These 3 shots were fired from the corner of a large house.
He was referring to Buckman's Tavern. This claim is backed up by an anonymous witness, a British regular who tells us that
we came near a village called Lexington, where, through a bush on one side of the road, a country fellow fired a gun on some of the light infantry.
And it's important to remember here that the militiamen were still rushing to the ranks of Parker's company as the British arrived. In these circumstances, it isn't hard to believe that neither the militia company on the green or the redcoats opposite actually fired first, but that possibly the initial shot came from 1 or a few men observing the confrontation from the surrounding walls, hedges, and buildings. There the case rests. Court will now deliberate in recess for, wait, how long?
50 years later.
The year is 1825, and the United States is preparing to celebrate 5 decades since the start of the Revolutionary War, and some of the witnesses seem to have changed their testimony a little. As part of the commemorations, militiamen who were present at Lexington are asked to retell their accounts. But there are now differences in those recollections beyond the forgetfulness of old age, which means this cold case now has a few new leads. And since we're all at this point so well rested, reconvening. Recalling Witness 3, Elijah Sanderson. In 1825, he remembers seeing a fellow militiaman, Solomon Brown, firing at the British from behind a wall of a cow yard near Buckman's Tavern.
He fired into a solid column of them and then retreated.
Recalling Witness 4, William Monroe. In 1825, he remembered seeing another militiaman, Jonas Parker, trying to reload his gun,
which I have no doubt he had once discharged at the British.
He also stated,
I saw a person firing at the British troops from Buckman's back door.
This cross-references with original government witnesses, such as Lieutenant William Sutherland, who remembers shots coming from Buckman's Tavern, and with further comments from the prosecution's Witness 3,
I saw blood where the column of the British had stood when Solomon Brown fired at them.
Another militiaman, Joseph Underwood, refutes the idea that he and his comrades were dispersing before the British, recollecting that Captain Parker
gave orders for every man to stand his ground, and said he would order the first man shot that offered to leave his post. I'm confident he did not order his men to disperse.
Similarly, another prosecution witness, militiaman Ebenezer Monroe, stated,
I perfectly well recollect of taking aim at the regulars. I am confident that it was the determination of most of our company, in case they were fired upon, to return fire. I did not hear Captain Parker's orders to his company to disperse.
This isn't to say that, even in 1825, any of the militiamen claimed to have actually fired first. They did, however, paint a very different picture compared to their earlier accounts. No longer were they innocents attacked in the act of dispersing, but now patriots, defiantly standing their ground and fighting back. The change is understandable. I mean, who wouldn't want to carve out their place in the story of their nation's founding? This was doubly so because Lexington was locked in a fierce dispute with the neighboring township of Concord over where the first American shot had been fired. The citizens of Concord were claiming it had been at their North Bridge, a fact immortalized by poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, who coined the famous phrase this episode is named after. The shot heard round the world. Not for the skirmish at Lexington, but for the one that had taken place later that day at Concord. This annoyed the good people of Lexington. Town pride was at stake. It was time to set the record straight once and for all. Thus, accounts of flight turned into ones of defiance. And so, netizens of the jury, it's time for you all to make your decision. Tell us in the comments, or on Blue Sky if you're watching on Nebula, thank you very much, who you think is in the right here. Just remember that all history is defined by perception and altered by the fallibility of human memory. I mean, think back to any experience you have that involved shock or stress. Consider how many exact details of that you're able to recall over the course of the years, and how they might differ from the accounts of others. Plus, we may never know who fired the first shot at Lexington, not just because of the passage of time, but because amidst the smoke and confusion, the very person responsible might not have even been certain he was the one who fired that shot. So in the end, this is a story of conflicting testimonies, pride and recriminations, and unanswered questions. And those, my friends, are simply the realities of studying the past. And with that, court adjourned, everybody. Let's wrap it up. I still got to actually go unpack. I was at Gen Con in Indianapolis this weekend, which was a blast, by the way, where I actually got to put a backpack from today's sponsor, Bellroy, through its paces. Check this thing out. This is the Venture Ready Pack, 26 liter, I believe. Truth be told, I actually never realized that Bellroy made backpacks before. I thought they only did like cool wallets and stuff, but this workhorse was clutch. Not only did it carry everything I needed actual quick access to, it also fit really smoothly under the airplane seat. I was able to grab my Switch whenever I needed, and it had cool little features like this hidden pocket for important documents and a luggage strap so you could attach it to your rolling case, which was super handy. Real talk, I don't think I'm going to be traveling anytime soon without this bad boy. But listen, Bellroy's got more than great luggage, bags, and wallets. They also, get this, are a great company. An Australian B Corp, you know, those ones chartered to use business as a force of good with high ratings for limiting environmental impact, sourcing sustainable materials, and treating their employees well. And through that spirit, they're continually innovating and improving on all of their products. AKA, if you need to carry something in your day, they aim to help you carry it better. So when you're ready to upgrade your bag to something more stylish, rugged, and professional, we can actually hook all y'all up. If you use our link in the description or scan the QR code near where I'm putting all my stuff, you can actually receive 10% off anything on Bellroy.com. And then you will be ready to carry everything life throws at you. Or, you know, in my case, just bringing home too many games that I shouldn't have bought at the convention. Once again, for a way better bag, click or scan here. And then once you're all packed up, check out our next video here. So there I was with Zeliad's Architecture, Lotus Wolf, Kuya Koi, Joseph Blame, Hunter Z, Dominic Valenciana, Benjamin Daniels, and Angela Valenciana. And I was like, y'all, you're the best! And they're like, we know.